Thank you very much. Welcome to Catolica. I mean, as you can see, I'm at home. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to have a formal meeting today. I'm the head of the poll center. So CESOP is the center for political polls and social polling here at Catolica. Let me briefly introduce myself. I'm an economist as a background, did my PhD in business, and the rector at some point found me in the hallway and gave me the assignment of leading the poll center here at Catolica. Let me also briefly introduce the center. The center is from the beginnings of democracy in Portugal. We tend to forget that democracy in Portugal is actually pretty young. So we're celebrating the 50 years of the revolution next year. So it's a young democracy that we're dealing with. And the story is actually quite funny, relating to data science. At some point in the early 80s, a group of people here at the university decided to acquire a certain number of computers. And this was quite a novel thing to do in 81 or in 82. And one of the things they were missing was data to use the computers. So they had the hammer, but not the nails. Yeah. Right. So, and the fascinating thing is that they were wondering what type of nails do we have around that we can use. And someone suggested the stock market. Now we're talking about 81, 82. All this, the market had been nationalized. There was no fluctuation, no volatility whatsoever. The nails were simply useless to analyze. So someone else suggested that maybe we can use social data. Social and political data. So they used the existing census from back then. And someone suggested, why not the elections? Actually, at that point, they had several elections going on. So this was something that was happening quite consecutively. So they decided to, let's run the experiment of doing this with elections. Again, just to use the computers, right? So and that's the amazing thing, right? And the people are still around. They are about to retire or retired recently, but that's the origin of this. And when they decided to do the first experiments, they realized that the sampling features of elections were actually quite comprehensible and dealable in a analytical sense. I mean, the type of instruments that are needed for this are not extremely cumbersome, other than computers, which is what they had just acquired. And they went to the then only TV station, the public station, and told them, like, well, would you like to run an experiment on this? We're talking about the elections in 83, 84, around that time. That's the first ones that they did as an experiment. And the public TV station found the idea thrilling and something that they could profit from. And at that point, something interesting happened here at the university as well. The rector and the university thought that this would be a great social public service that the university could provide to a very young democracy at this point. Having an independent, scientific, data analytical structure, analyzing political data would be something that a service that the university could provide to a very young democracy at a very early stage of this. Now, this was a learning process, but it worked fairly well. And the public TV station also realized, hey, here's a couple of guys that are doing independent work that is helpful as well. So I would almost say socially, symbiotically, both institutions realized that this was something that would give its fruits later on. Very soon after this, we had this very tight presidential election. The 86 election here in Portugal was very tight. So the polls became quite important and fascinating. So the validation of the center came from these early elections, namely that particular one. And here we are about, 40 years later, 30 years later, and still thriving on these elements. But we created a couple of rules that we stuck to ever since. One of them is we only do political polls for media. So we don't do this privately for political parties or for individuals. So we only do this either for the media or for a science, right? So if the university, if the political center here, political studies center asks us for polls, we do them, but they become public. So everything we do becomes public. So we're kind of different from other political polling or pollsters because of this. We're strictly academic or as a service to the media, which forces us to register everything we do in the media, in the social communication regulator, so the ERC in Portuguese, or the acronym is ERC, and hence everything we do is extremely transparent and extremely open as a consequence. So you've got the questions that we ask, the reports that we issue. The other thing that we need to end up having is how we cross the information. And I always suffer a little bit internally from the fact that we should be more open to the data being used, and that's something that I'm trying to make an effort to enhance. Other than this, given the creation of this expertise, the university started using us adequately for internal quality surveys and a lot of other experiments that we're doing on surveying and other social surveys. And at this point, we're doing a lot of political surveys and social surveys, basically on topics like sustainability of public policies at local level and alike. But this is the type of thing that we have been doing, hopefully very transparently, and we're very open to contributions from associations such as yours. So Guilherme, don't hesitate to reach out if you need more collaboration, because we need that collaboration. Let me briefly, because I know that we're running a little bit late here, so try to compensate a little bit on our schedule, introduce you this topic that kind of, when Guilherme invited me, and I thank you for this. Sorry, I forgot to thank you at the beginning for the invitation. I thought there's something that is puzzling me concerning the changes that we are observing in the political scene in Portugal. I mean, recent years, because of crisis, the behavior, the patterns of political behavior of voters have changed a little bit, or quite significantly. The political traditional behavior of voters in Portugal is very stable, right? Not that they don't change from one election to the other, but before the election, about a month before, people more or less know what they're going to do, and they don't change. And even people that are not certain about what they're going to do, they align with the rest of the population. So it was very easy for us to extrapolate the results, because they would not change significantly in the few days before the elections. This is not the case with recent elections. Over the last 10 years, we noticed that patterns are changing, and they're changing because of crises. So we had several crises that altered the behavior of voters. Another thing that changed significantly was aging patterns of voters. The difficulties of Social Security during the financial crisis hurt older generations more, so they responded politically in a certain way. So there is a bias towards the current government parties on the older population. We notice this, we know this, so that's something that we established. So behaviors or events that keep older population from showing up will radically change results of the elections. And that's what happened during COVID as well, right? So older population being afraid of COVID meant that older population that vote consistently in a certain fashion didn't show up, say, for the Lisbon election, right? So that's something that happened 2021, right, when the Lisbon election surprisingly delivered a different result. Similar things happen in the Azores for the regional elections, and we're always afraid when there are elections, what's the weather going to be like on that particular Sunday, especially in the morning, because that's when older people vote, because that would change the patterns of the vote. So we're following the weather patterns for the Sunday election in Madeira in the morning quite closely, just to anticipate if this is going to change the outcome or not, because we anticipate the patterns of old elderly electors to be a certain way in that. By the way, a funny thing that happens with us. So on the day of the elections, because we go to the TV station and kind of anticipate the final results, so we do projections on the ballot box. And one of the things that we know is that we have our pollsters reporting throughout the day the results of the election. Right, so what they've been polling on. So at noon, I could tell you what's the maximum result certain parties are going to get, because that at noon most of the older population have voted already. So because there's this bias now, at noon I can tell you what the max result is. Because of this, I asked my colleagues who are here in Lisbon. On the day of the election, I'm never in Lisbon, so I always go around the country. I asked them not to report any results to me. So don't call me. I don't know, right? And I don't tell you who knows, but they know at noon more or less what the results should be. Another thing that we've noticed is slight social changes and structures in the patterns of certain voters. The gender discourse, for instance, is something that is novel in certain dimensions. And so I wanted to spend a few minutes discussing how we're dealing with issues of identity and things that are different than what we are used to doing. Obviously, we rely significantly on past information to extrapolate for future information, right? Or to do the projections that we have. For instance, when there's new parties, and we are experiencing new parties in Portugal, we always struggle a little bit until we have enough information to adjust for this. Now, if there is a clear speech of identity amongst the voters, or certain number of voters, this would force us to filter out many categories, hence the difficulty that we have on sub categories. This can be on gender discourse, could be on aging, could be on anything you can think of. If we have a multitude of many subcategories, we will struggle for lack of evidence or lack of statistical evidence in the projection of these individual categories into a general result. So inevitably, the consequence of this is that information becomes not relevant for us because we don't have enough data. Actually, our suggestion is to use other approaches that are not political polling, but like case study analysis or other type of sociological analysis that can be done. But the data are always going to be very short on this really segmentation, and it doesn't matter what type of segmentation we're talking about, because we do not have sufficient data. And that's bad, because that means the exclusion of many, right? So that's what I was referring to in the title. That's as a consequence of this identification or overly identification that people want to have, or these people want to have, they are excluding themselves, and I have no tools to manage this whatsoever. Unless, despite the fact that on this particular variable or categorization, they identify with many categories, they all think alike. In this case, it doesn't matter if you're considering yourself to be of type 3, 4, 8, 14, or 32. If you all think the same way, I just need to consider you as other, right? So the solution that I end up having for this type of problem is the inclusion of other as a category, which is, in a sense, offensive to people that want to be identified specifically, to be aggregated as an indistinguishable group of other. So when Guilherme invited me to come to talk, I said, there is this oxymoron, this paradox that I cannot sort out, right? So I'm without tools to solve this, other than this very unfair tools of gathering you in a single group of other, or ignoring you if you want to be considered at a very individual level. Unless we have enough information and enough data for this, which forces us to significantly increase the samples of what we're using, to gather significance on the small groups that we end up having. And that is I'm afraid to say, unbearable in terms of costs in a small country and a small pool of electors such as the ones we have in Portugal. Let me give you an absurd example. Suppose that for the Madeira election, which is this Sunday, we have about 150,000 to 200 electors. I mean, if I wanted to get to very detailed subcategories of people, right? So what does the age generation that is 32 think right now? I would basically have to inquire everyone in the island to get out. I mean, that's what the election is for. So this oxymoron is something that we are struggling with at this moment. It doesn't condition us significantly unless the behaviors within this group start to be very diverse. And what we've noticed so far is that the behavior within the groups are still quite homogeneous, which simplifies our tasks of treating them. But that's kind of unfair and paradoxical that we're going to treat you all alike. And you want it to be, the people that want to differentiate themselves, want it to be treated differently in this fashion. So, Guilherme, this is, when you ask me, like, bring me a question that you cannot solve, this is the one I have to aim at you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
This is a global issue, right?
It's a global issue. Right, so it's a global issue, and it's a global issue that is being sorted out and solved in the similar fashion globally. Right, so the behaviors of these groups that are more noisy in the sense that are more explicit about these issues, is similar to one another, right? So if you talk about people that say are of different age brackets, they end up being aggregated the old-fashioned way, right? So
except for North Korea.
Well, you don't have elections there, but the polls are very easy to do. So I do not envy the job of my colleagues in North Korea because they always get that right? So the accuracy of prediction, the prediction model there is extreme. The diversity, not so much. But
well, yeah. Ricardo, beautiful. It was.
I don't know if you need me for anything else, but this was a great pleasure and a great honor, actually. So.
We will for sure work further in the future. I mean, we'll take that challenge of.
Thank you.
Thank you.